What if I told you the stories whispered around campfires thousands of years ago still shape the way we dream, fear, and make sense of the world today? These aren't just dusty old tales, they're living traditions, pulsing beneath the surface of our modern lives. Think about the last time you felt a chill down your spine when walking through a dark forest, or how you instinctively knock on wood to ward off bad luck. These reactions aren't accidents, they're echoes of ancient myths, passed down through generations like secret heirlooms hidden in our collective memory. But here's what's even more astonishing. Some of these traditions aren't just fragments. They've survived almost unchanged, carried forward in rituals, symbols, and stories so powerful they've outlasted empires, plagues, and the rise and fall of civilizations. From the haunting ballads of Celtic banshees to the sacred fire ceremonies of Zoroastrian priests, these myths have traveled through time, whispered from parent to child, encoded in festivals, and even buried in the foundations of our cities. And they're not just relics, they're clues to understanding who we were and who we've become. That's why today we're unraveling 30 of the most extraordinary mythical traditions that have defied time itself. Some will feel eerily familiar, like meeting a stranger who knows your deepest secrets. Others will transport you to forgotten worlds where gods walked among mortals and the boundaries between reality and legend blurred. You'll discover why certain curses still make people shudder centuries later, how a single forbidden name can hold unspeakable power, and why some rituals must be performed exactly as they were 1,000 years ago, or risk awakening something best left sleeping. This isn't just a journey into the past, it's an exploration of the invisible threads that still bind us to the imaginations of our ancestors. So settle in, because the stories you're about to hear might just change the way you see the world. Let's start with a flame that has never truly gone out: the Norse Yule log. Picture this, a bone-chilling Scandinavian winter, the sun vanishing for weeks, and a people bracing against the endless dark. For the Vikings, this wasn't just a season, it was a battleground between light and shadow. Their weapon, a massive oak log dragged into the hearth with reverence, set ablaze to honor Odin as he rode across the sky with the wild hunt, his spectral army howling in the wind. The log wasn't just firewood, it was a pact with the gods. As it burned for 12 nights, one for each month of the year, its sparks were believed to carry prayers to the heavens, and its ashes, scattered over fields to ensure fertility or tucked under beds to ward off evil spirits. But here's where it gets fascinating. When Christianity spread north, the church didn't stamp out this fiery ritual, they rebranded it. The Yule log became a symbol of the light of Christ, burning in homes across Europe. The 12 nights, they merged with the Christmas season. Even the candy-striped treats we dunk in cocoa today, Yule logs, are edible echoes of this ancient tradition. Yet the old magic lingers. In some European villages, families still save a charred piece of the log to light next year's fire, a thread of continuity stretching back to the age of longships and sagas. It's a rare case where the myth didn't fade, it just learned new names. So the next time you cozy up by a fireplace or slice into a chocolate bûche de Nile, remember, you're tasting a story that once fed the souls of warriors and kings. Now imagine a night when the boundary between the living and the dead grows so thin you could reach through it. That's exactly what the Celts feared and celebrated during Samhain, the festival that would one day become Halloween. As autumn's last leaves fell, they believed the veil separating our world from the other world dissolved, allowing spirits, fairies, and even vengeful ancestors to walk freely among the living. But this wasn't just a night of terror, it was a sacred moment of communion. Villagers extinguished every hearthfire, plunging their homes into darkness, then gathered around colossal communal bonfires. These flames weren't just for light, they were purification, a ritual shield against the supernatural chaos swirling in the shadows. The rituals were as practical as they were mystical. Families offered food to appease wandering spirits, setting places at their tables for the dead, a tradition echoing in today's Halloween offerings of candy. Masked villagers roamed the roads not for treats, but to confuse malevolent entities by blending in with them. Some historians trace modern trick-or-treating to this very practice, though instead of disguising themselves from ghosts, children now play the ghosts themselves. Even the jack-o'-lantern's flickering grin has roots in Samhain, when turnips hollowed out to hold embers from the sacred fires were carried as protective charms against the night's unseen dangers. But the bonfires held deeper magic. Druids performed divinations in their smoky glow, casting animal bones into the flames to read the coming year's fortunes. Cattle were driven between twin fires for blessing before winter, and torches lit from these blazes were carried home to reignite hearths, symbolically binding the community together. When Christianity arrived, the church reframed Samhain as All Hallows' Eve, but the old beliefs never truly died. Today's Halloween bonfires in Ireland and Scotland still crackle with that ancient purpose. Just listen carefully, and you might hear the whispers of 1,000 generations in the sparks that rise into the October sky. There are secrets so powerful, so sacred, that speaking them aloud could cost you your life. That was the deadly promise binding initiates of the Eleusinian Mysteries, Greece's most hallowed and enigmatic religious rites. For nearly 2,000 years, from the Bronze Age to the fall of Rome, pilgrims trekked to the temple of Demeter at Eleusis, risking bandits and treacherous seas for a chance to witness what even the philosopher Socrates called the most august of all mysteries. What unfolded inside those torch-lit halls was so transformative that participants, including emperors and playwrights, emerged forever changed, yet never breathed a word of what they saw. At the heart of these rituals lay a mother's grief and a daughter's resurrection. The myth was deceptively simple. Demeter, goddess of the harvest, searched desperately for her daughter Persephone after Hades dragged her into the underworld. In her despair, Demeter cursed the earth with famine until Persephone was allowed to return each spring, a cycle explaining the seasons. But the Eleusinian rites transformed this story into something far more profound. Initiates didn't just hear the tale, they lived it, walking the same emotional gauntlet as Demeter through days of fasting, sacred dances, and a harrowing descent into pitch-black tunnels symbolizing the underworld. The climax, drinking kykeon, a mysterious barley brew that scholars now suspect contained ergot, a fungus with psychedelic properties. This wasn't mere intoxication. The kykeon ritual blurred the line between mortal and divine, offering initiates a visceral encounter with the afterlife. Ancient accounts describe visions so dazzling that the soul knew neither fear nor darkness, only an overwhelming sense of unity with the cosmos. Some scholars believe these experiences birthed Plato's theory of the immortal soul, while others argue the rites promised actual immortality, hence their infamous secrecy. Betraying the mysteries meant execution, a fate suffered by the playwright Aeschylus when he allegedly revealed too much in his tragedies. Even today, despite centuries of speculation, we still don't know exactly what transpired in Eleusis' inner sanctum. The truth perished with the last initiate when Christian Rome outlawed the rites in the 4th century. Yet echoes persist in the hushed rituals of modern fraternities, in psychotherapy's use of altered states for healing, even in our endless fascination with near-death experiences. The mysteries taught that death wasn't an end but a door, and that lesson, it seems, was too potent to ever fully disappear. Now, let's cross from the torchlight of Greece to the frozen steppes of Siberia, where a far more visceral tradition thrived. Among the nomadic Evenki people, shamans didn't just commune with spirits, they waged war against them. Picture a tent shuddering in a blizzard, the air thick with the reek of burning reindeer fat, as a shaman clad in iron totems beats a drum until his hands bleed. This wasn't performance, it was spiritual combat. The Evenki believed illness came from soul theft, malicious spirits kidnapping fragments of a person's essence. and only the shaman could track these thieves across the spirit world. What made these rituals extraordinary was their physicality. A skilled shaman's journey left tangible evidence: sweat-drenched furs, sudden temperature drops, even wounds appearing on their body matching spirit battles. Their costumes adorned with jingling metal symbols weren't mere decoration. Each piece represented a spirit ally, and the cacophony they made during trances was said to disorient hostile entities. The most revered shamans wore entire iron suits weighing over 40 pounds, a brutal test of endurance that proved their connection to the other world. But the true marvel was their drums, not instruments but living maps of the cosmos. Stretched with reindeer hide and painted with spirit realms, these drums served as vessels for flight. By rhythmically striking specific points, the shaman's consciousness would ride the sound waves into other dimensions. Ethnographers recorded shamans accurately describing events hundreds of miles away while in trances, and Soviet doctors initially sent to debunk them were stunned when certain rituals appeared to accelerate healing. When Stalin's regime nearly eradicated these practices in the 1930s, something unexpected happened. The spirits, it was said, retaliated. Machinery in state-run collective farms mysteriously broke down, and hunters reported being led astray by phantom reindeer omens blamed on angered ancestors. Today, as Evenki activists revive these traditions, scientists study their drumming patterns as early forms of sound therapy, and psychologists marvel at how their rituals externalized trauma centuries before modern medicine caught up. These weren't mere superstitions, they were sophisticated technologies of consciousness, forged in the world's harshest wilderness. From the hallucinatory visions of Eleusis to the shaman's spirit battles, what unites these traditions is their insistence that the unseen world isn't metaphorical. It's a place you can enter, confront, and sometimes even conquer. And that belief, it turns out, is far older than civilization itself. In the quiet corners of old Japanese homes where dust clings to forgotten objects, something remarkable stirs. According to Shinto tradition, when an item reaches its 100th year, it doesn't just gather dust, it awakens. These are the Tsukumogami, the tool spirits, beings born from the devotion poured into everyday objects over a lifetime. Picture a tattered paper lantern, its edges frayed from decades of use, suddenly uncurling bamboo ribs like skeletal fingers, or a discarded tea kettle growing legs and scampering away, its spout twisting into a shrieking mouth. This wasn't just fantasy, it was a profound spiritual truth woven into Japan's relationship with the material world. The most famous Tsukumogami tale tells of the Bakuchin, a lantern spirit that exacts revenge on owners who neglect it. In one Edo period story, a merchant tosses his old lantern into a river, only to be haunted by its ghostly glow night after night, until he retrieves it, cleans its stained paper, and gives it a place of honor in his home. The message was clear: objects weren't just possessions, but partners in life deserving respect. Even broken tools received ceremonial funerals in some villages, with priests offering prayers to appease their spirits before disposal. But Tsukumogami weren't always vengeful. Some became protectors, like the Chochin Obake, a lantern spirit that guided lost travelers through storms, or the Boroborotun, a patched-up cloth doll that hugged children to sleep. This duality reflected Shinto's core belief: everything contains kami, or sacred energy. A well-loved comb could bless its owner with good hair, while a mistreated broom might trip people in the dark. Modern anime like Natsume's Book of Friends and Mushishi keep these ideas alive, spinning stories of Tsukumogami as melancholy figures caught between human attachment and their newfound consciousness. What's truly fascinating is how this ancient belief still shapes Japanese consumer culture today. The concept of motenai, regret over waste, mirrors Tsukumogami logic, encouraging repair over replacement. Kyoto's Kiyomizu-dera Temple even holds annual object memorial services where broken dolls and electronics are laid to rest with incense and chanting. In a world drowning in disposability, the Tsukumogami whisper an uncomfortable truth. The things we discard might remember how we loved them or how we didn't. So next time you're about to toss out that cracked mug or creaky chair, pause. Who knows what's watching from the shadows, counting the years until it wakes? As the summer sun reaches its zenith, Slavic villages erupt in a riot of fire, flowers, and forbidden magic. Kupala Night, the ancient midsummer festival marking the year's shortest darkness, was never just a celebration. It was a rebellion against the natural order itself. Imagine forests alive with barefoot maidens weaving flower crowns by moonlight, their fingertips stained with dew as they braid chamomile and wild chervil into circles believed to hold prophetic power. These wreaths weren't mere decorations, they were floating oracles, set adrift on rivers with lit candles. Their movements foretold love, longevity, or if the crown sank, a year of sorrow. But the true heart of Kupala pulsed with fire. As bonfires roared to life, couples clasped hands and leaped over flames, not for sport, but as a trial by purification. The higher the jump, the stronger the bond, or so the elders claimed. Those who faltered risked more than embarrassment. They invited gossip about hidden sins. Yet the boldest ritual was reserved for the unmarried. Young women would vanish into the woods at midnight, their white linen shifts glowing like ghosts between the trees. They weren't fleeing, they were hunting. Legend whispered that on this one night, the mythical fern flower bloomed in a golden burst for mere seconds, granting its finder clairvoyance and control over all creation. The irony, ferns don't flower. Botanists would scoff, but Slavic mystics knew better. This flower symbolized the rare moment when earthly and supernatural realms aligned. Men who followed the women into the darkness weren't just suitors, they were protectors, guarding against the Ruzalki, water spirits said to drag trespassers into drowning embraces. Even Kupala's timing was a marvel of pagan astronomy, coinciding with the summer solstice so precisely that medieval chroniclers accused witches of stopping the sun in its course. When Christianity spread through the Slavic world, the church tried to rebrand Kupala as the feast of John the Baptist, hence Ivan Kupala Day. But the people simply grafted the saint onto their existing rites, creating a hybrid that still thrives today. In Ukraine, girls float wreaths down the Dnieper River while boys stage mock rescue attempts, reenacting the fern quest with playful theatricality. Belarusian villagers weave flower garlands so intricate they're displayed in museums, while Polish towns host mass fire-jumping competitions judged by local firefighters. Yet traces of the old magic linger. Rural elders still warn against swimming after Kupala, lest the Ruzalki claim you. Farmers time their harvests by the thickness of the morning dew, believing it carries Kupala's blessing. And if you listen closely during the festival's peak, when the bonfires burn lowest, you might hear a curious proverb whispered between the embers: the fern doesn't bloom, it thunders. A reminder that some mysteries refuse to be uprooted, no matter how many centuries pass. Transitioning from the riotous flames of Kupala, we find a quieter but equally potent tradition nestled in the Himalayas, one where yarn becomes a lifeline between worlds. The Tibetan Lhasa festival's rope-weaving rituals transform ordinary wool into sacred bonds, with monks braiding strands infused with mantras to trap misfortune before the new year dawns. Like Kupala's wreaths, these ropes hold divinatory power, but their purpose is inversion. Where Slavs sought passion and fertility, Tibetans pursued protection from spiritual debt. What unites them is the primal human urge to mark time not just by calendars, but by acts of transformation, whether through fire, fiber, or flowers. Kupala's genius was recognizing midsummer not as a date, but as a doorway. A single night when young lovers could rewrite fate, when farmers could bargain with the elements, when even the humblest fern might reveal itself as the key to all-knowing. In our modern world of electric lights and climate control, we've lost the urgency of such rituals, but Kupala whispers a challenge. What would you risk for one night of pure, unfiltered magic? The answer might just lie in the embers at your feet. On certain moonless nights along Hawaii's volcanic coasts, the air itself seems to hold its breath. That's when the earth trembles with footsteps no living being could make. The march of the Huakai Po, the legendary night marchers. These aren't just ghosts, they're the spectral army of ancient Hawaiian chiefs, warriors bound by death itself to patrol the paths they once walked in life. Their processions, illuminated by eerie torchlight and echoing with the beat of invisible pahu drums, follow sacred trails called ala routes etched into the land centuries ago, often tracing lava flows or cliffside passes where battles were fought. To stumble upon them is to stand at the threshold between reverence and peril. The rules of survival are as precise as they are terrifying. Never look directly at them. A single glance at their decaying faces curses you with their fate. Lie face down, bare your belly in submission, and chant the names of your ancestors to prove your bloodline's purity. Even then, there are no guarantees. Modern accounts tell of hikers who ignored local warnings and vanished near trails like Oahu's Nayunupali, where King Kamehameha's forces once drove rival warriors off the cliffs. Others speak of cameras malfunctioning or recordings capturing only garbled whispers where the marchers should be. But here's what's most striking: these legends aren't confined to history books. In 2011, construction on a Maui resort halted when workers reported tools moving on their own and unnaturally cold patches along a planned golf course, an area elders identified as an ala. The project was redesigned to skirt the path. On the Big Island, a park ranger described hearing war chants near Payuhonua o Hononau's temple walls at midnight, though no living soul was present. Even technology bows to the taboos. Google Earth's early images of certain ala mysteriously blurred, as if the land itself refused to be fully seen. Protection rituals endure, blending old and new. Some carry a wa root to offer as tribute, while others tie leaves around their wrists, a practice once reserved for kahuna priests. Tour guides whisper of leaving salt or fish at crossroads, and hotels near known ala keep night marcher kits with tie leaf bundles for panicked guests. The deeper lesson: these traditions aren't about fear but respect. The marchers guard more than trails, they defend a covenant between the land and its people. When developers bulldoze sacred ground or hikers mock the warnings, the stories grow louder, as if the past itself is demanding to be remembered. Perhaps that's why the encounters persist. Not as hallucinations or hoaxes, but as reminders that some boundaries between the living and the dead, the sacred and the profane, were never meant to be crossed. The next time you walk Hawaii's trails at dusk, listen for the distant beat of drums. It might just be the wind, or it might be the marchers asking if you know enough to lower your eyes. Imagine a world holding its breath in total darkness, no torchlight, no hearth smoke curling into the sky, not even an ember glowing in a potter's kiln. This wasn't a power outage, it was the climax of the Aztec New Fire ceremony, a ritual so crucial that the survival of the entire cosmos depended on it. Every 52 years, when the solar and sacred calendars aligned, the Aztecs believed the sun might simply stop. Their solution: extinguish every flame across the empire, from the grandest temple braziers to the humblest cooking fires, plunging millions into intentional night. The stakes couldn't have been higher. According to Aztec cosmology, the universe had already been destroyed and remade 4 times. The 5th sun, their current era, would perish too unless fed with the most potent energy source, human blood. As the constellation the Aztecs called the Fire Drill, our Orion's belt, reached its zenith, priests ascended the volcano Huaxtlan near modern-day Mexico City. There, with the crowd below gripping extinguished hearthstones in silent terror, a chosen victim was laid across a sacrificial stone. At the precise celestial moment, a priest struck a fire drill into the captive's chest, using the friction of wood against bone to spark new flames directly from a human heart. This wasn't arbitrary cruelty, it was astrophysics as they understood it. The Aztecs tracked the 52-year cycle with obsidian mirrors and precise codices, recognizing it as the point when their calendar round reset. If the fire lighting failed, the Tsukumogami star demons lurking between worlds would descend to devour humanity, but success meant renewal. Messengers relayed the sacred flame via torches to every city, households reigniting their fires from this single divine source. Even conquered territories participated, though their fires were lit last a political statement woven into the ritual. Archaeological evidence reveals how deeply this ceremony permeated daily life. Excavations show households buried old grinding stones and shattered pottery to mark the cycle's end, then replaced them with new items symbolizing cosmic rebirth. The most chilling proof, mass infant burials at temple sites, their skeletal remains arranged in circular patterns mirroring the new fire glyph. These children, likely offered voluntarily by their families, were believed to become deity-like protectors in the next cycle. What's astonishing is how fragments of this tradition persist. In remote Mexican villages, some still observe a modified new fire by replacing household items annually. Modern Neo-Aztec groups reinterpret the ceremony without sacrifice, focusing on its themes of renewal. Even Mexico City's 2006 celebration of the calendar's reset, though stripped of its darker elements, drew thousands to the Zocalo, where dancers in feathered regalia reenacted the flame's rebirth. The new fire ceremony reveals a civilization that saw time not as linear, but as a spiraling thread needing constant repair. Their astronomers could predict eclipses down to the minute, yet chose to confront the universe's fragility with fire and faith. In an age of climate crisis, their message resonates uncomfortably. Civilizations flourish not by dominating nature, but by recognizing their pact with forces far older than empires. When those torches finally flared across the valley that long ago night, it wasn't just fire that spread. It was the collective relief of a people who'd stared into the void and for another 52 years at least convinced it to blink. Deep in the frozen mists of Finnish folklore lies a mystery that's puzzled scholars for centuries, a magical device so powerful it could spin salt, grain, and gold out of thin air, yet vanish without a trace when greed tore it apart. The Sampo, centerpiece of the Kalevala epic, wasn't just a fairy tale treasure. To the ancient Finns, it was the very engine of creation itself, a cosmic loom weaving the fabric of reality. Picture this: a blacksmith god, Ilmarinen, hammers the Sampo into existence at the demand of a sorceress, its components forged from the swan's milk and barley grain of the primordial world. But here's where it gets strange. This wasn't some enchanted jewelry box. Descriptions paint it as a whirling, clanking contraption with many colored lids and a mechanism that ground endlessly, producing not just wealth but the very order of the universe. What makes the Sampo extraordinary is how it intertwines with Finland's brutal geography. In a land where winters could starve entire villages, the idea of an inexhaustible mill wasn't just fantasy, it was survival poetry. The Kalevala describes it anchored to the world pillar, a mythical axis connecting Earth to the heavens, suggesting the Sampo didn't just create abundance, it sustained cosmic balance. When the hero Vainamaranan finally steals it from the witch Lauhai, the ensuing battle doesn't just shatter the device, it fractures reality. The broken pieces sink into the Baltic Sea, where legends claim they still churn the waves into whirlpools, while the intact lid becomes Finland's starry sky. Modern scholars are still unraveling its secrets. Some argue the Sampo was a metaphor for early watermills, revolutionary technology for medieval Finns. Others see parallels to Norse mythology's grot mill or even Hindu churning of the ocean myths, suggesting a lost Arctic cosmology, the wildest theory. That it mirrors ancient Vimana flying machines with its rotating parts and energy-generating powers, but perhaps the most haunting clue comes from Finnish folk magic. As recently as the 19th century, coastal fishermen carried Sampo stones, ordinary rocks rubbed smooth and placed in grain sacks to ensure full harvests. as if clinging to whispers of that original world-feeding machine. The Sampo's true magic lies in its duality. It's both a cautionary tale about greed destroyed when men and gods fought over its bounty, and a testament to human ingenuity's boundless aspirations. Next time you see a windmill's sails turning or hear factory gears hum, listen closely. That rhythmic clatter might just echo the lost Sampo song, reminding us that every civilization, no matter how ancient, dreams of building something that outlasts time itself. From the Baltic's icy depths to the Kalevala's verses, the Sampo endures not as a relic but as a question. What would you sacrifice for endless prosperity? And what happens when the machines we build to save us become the very things worth destroying? For 12 dizzying days each spring, the world's first metropolis surrendered to a spectacle of chaos, redemption, and cosmic theater. The Akitu festival wasn't just Babylon's New Year. It was a meticulously staged drama where gods walked among mortals, kings endured public degradation, and the fate of the universe hung in the balance. At its heart lay the Enuma Elish, the Mesopotamian creation epic recited in full-throated chorus by priests, recounting how Marduk, patron god of Babylon, slew the primordial sea monster Tiamat and fashioned order from her carcass. But this wasn't mere storytelling, it was a reactivation of the divine blueprint that kept reality intact. The festival's opening acts were pure psychological warfare against chaos. Statues of lesser gods from across Mesopotamia were paraded into Babylon's Esagila temple, not as honored guests but as prisoners acknowledging Marduk's supremacy. Meanwhile, the king underwent a ritual stripping of his crown, scepter, and even his royal robes before being dragged before Marduk's statue. In a shocking display, the high priest would slap the monarch's face hard enough to draw tears, a humiliating test of his worthiness. If the king wept copiously, it proved Marduk's continued favor, but the ordeal didn't end there. He was forced to kneel and recite a chilling confession. "I have not sinned, O Lord of the lands, I have not been neglectful of your divinity." This theatrical self-abasement served a profound purpose, demonstrating that even earthly power derived from divine consent, renewable only through annual reckoning. Then came the festival's most surreal moment, the missing god ritual. As priests wailed in apparent despair, Marduk's statue vanished from its shrine, spirited away to a house of exile outside the city. Cuneiform tablets describe markets shuttering and citizens fasting while rumors spread that the god had been murdered by chaos demons. For 3 days, Babylon teetered on the brink of cosmological collapse until Marduk's triumphant return, accompanied by a mock battle where priests clashed with actors playing his enemies. His resurrection wasn't just symbolism, it triggered the spring flood's recession, ensuring another year of fertile soil. The Akitu's genius lay in its layered meanings. For farmers, it marked the barley harvest. For politicians, it reinforced Babylon's dominance over subject cities. And for philosophers, it posed timeless questions about power's fragility. When Persian conquerors adopted the ritual, they removed the king's humiliation, a fatal mistake traditionalists claimed that weakened their legitimacy. Even the festival's schedule reflected advanced astronomy. Its 12 days mirrored the 12 lunar months, with rituals timed to celestial events visible from Babylon's ziggurats. Modern echoes of Akitu abound. The Jewish Passover's cleansing of leaven shares its spring renewal theme, while the Christian Easter's death and resurrection narrative parallels Marduk's exile. Even our New Year's resolutions carry faint whispers of the king's accountability ritual, but perhaps the most poignant legacy lies in a recently deciphered tablet describing a desperate Akitu celebrated as enemy armies closed in on Babylon. The priests held the festival anyway, as if believing that by correctly performing the rites, they could stave off doom through sheer ceremonial will. It didn't work, but for 20 centuries it convinced civilization that order could always triumph over chaos, if only for another turning of the year. In the red rock canyons of the Navajo Nation, there's a whisper so dangerous elders warn it could follow you home.
The Yi Noldlushiai skinwalkers aren't just monsters from campfire tales. They're a horrifying intersection of witchcraft and betrayal, rooted in traditions so sacred many Navajo refuse to speak of them at night. Unlike European werewolves, which transform through curses or full moons, skinwalkers aren't victims of fate. They're willing participants in evil, humans who have gained the power to wear animal skins through unspeakable acts, murdering family members, desecrating graves, or consuming human flesh. The transformation isn't just physical, it's a complete surrender of humanity for power. What makes the skinwalker uniquely terrifying is its intelligence. These aren't mindless beasts howling at the moon. They mimic voices of loved ones to lure victims into the desert, manipulate objects from a distance, and allegedly move faster than the eye can track. Traditional accounts describe their eyes glowing amber or red in the dark, their movements unnaturally fluid, as if their bones have liquefied. Some say they can possess animals, turning coyotes into silent stalkers or owls into spies. The most chilling detail, they're always someone you know, a neighbor, a distant relative, someone who once sat across from you at a ceremony. This lore isn't confined to history. In the 1980s, a Navajo nurse working near Monument Valley reported seeing a tall, emaciated figure with elongated limbs crawling along her ceiling. Construction crews on tribal lands have abandoned projects after equipment malfunctioned and workers fell violently ill, events attributed to skinwalker interference. Even the infamous Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, now studied by paranormal investigators, sits on land once part of the Ute people's territory where similar shapeshifter legends persist. The U.S. government's brief investigation into the ranch in the 1990s, dubbed the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, only added fuel to the mystery with reports of invisible entities and mutilated cattle. Contrast this with European werewolf myths where transformation is often a punishment. The Greek legend of Lycaon turned into a wolf for serving Zeus human flesh, or the medieval trials of werewolves, who are usually mentally ill outcasts. Even Hollywood's werewolves follow this template, tormented souls fighting their curse. But skinwalkers, they chose this. There's no silver bullet or wolfsbane to stop them. Traditional Navajo protections involve sacred corn pollen, cedar ash, or prayers sung in the old language rituals that only hold power if the user's own spirit is clean. The deepest taboo isn't encountering a skinwalker, it's talking about them too openly. Many Navajo believe speaking their name invites attention, like whispering in a quiet room and hearing something whisper back. This cultural reluctance has led to misunderstandings. Outsiders often confuse skinwalkers with benign shapeshifter tales from other tribes, or worse, commercialize the lore as spooky entertainment. The difference lies in context. For the Navajo, skinwalkers aren't folklore, they're a reminder that evil isn't an abstract force. It's a choice, one that walks among us wearing familiar faces. So why does this tradition endure? Perhaps because it articulates a universal fear that the most monstrous things aren't lurking in shadows, but sitting across from us in broad daylight, hiding in skins we think we know. The next time you hear an animal cry that sounds almost human, or feel the prickle of unseen eyes at your back, remember, some legends refuse to stay in the past. And some skins, once put on, can't be taken off. The air in China during the 7th lunar month hangs thick with smoke and superstition. This is Zhongyuan Jai, the Hungry Ghost Festival, when the gates of the underworld swing open, releasing restless spirits to wander among the living. Unlike Halloween's playful scares, this tradition pulses with solemn urgency. For 30 days, the deceased return hungry, not just for food, but for acknowledgement, justice, and peace. Streets become theaters of the unseen, with communities staging elaborate operas on temporary bamboo stages. But these performances aren't for the living audience. Rows of empty chairs face the musicians, reserved for invisible guests whose applause might come only as a sudden chill or the rustle of unseen robes. At the heart of the festival lies a paradox, generosity mingled with fear. Families spill into alleys at dusk, burning joss paper printed to resemble everything from luxury cars to designer handbags, offerings meant to placate ancestors lest they bring misfortune. Some even fold paper iPhones, ensuring the dead stay connected to the modern world. But not all spirits are benevolent. The hungry ghosts are those who died unjustly, suicides, orphans, victims of violence, doomed to wander with gaping mouths and needle throats, unable to eat unless fed by the living. Rice scattered at crossroads or bowls of noodles left on park benches serve as their only meals. The rituals reveal a society negotiating with its unresolved past. In Singapore, towering papier-mâché King of Hell statues preside over street fairs, while Taiwan's Keelung Midsummer Ghost Festival features floating lanterns released to guide lost souls out to sea. Even business deals stall during Ghost Month. No one signs contracts or moves houses, fearing unseen interference. The most striking custom, the ghost marriage, where families arrange posthumous weddings for unmarried descendants, believing lonely spirits might otherwise haunt the living. Modernity hasn't dulled these traditions. High-rise dwellers in Hong Kong use metal bins for safe joss paper burning, while apps now offer digital offerings, though purists argue pixels can't satisfy spiritual hunger. Archaeologists recently discovered Song Dynasty ghost money in a Jiangxi tomb, proving the practice spans nearly 1,000 years, and in a twist Kafka would appreciate, some Chinese banks print hell bank notes with absurd denominations, a trillion here, a quadrillion there, to outpace underworld inflation. What makes Ghost Month endure isn't just superstition, but its raw humanity. It's a culture staring into the abyss and responding not with horror, but with banquets, art, and care. Those empty opera seats, they whisper a truth more unsettling than any ghost story. The dead don't just want our fear, they want our attention. And for 1 month each year, an entire civilization turns its gaze backward, answering with firelight, applause, and the smell of incense curling into the summer night. When the first hawthorn blossoms unfurled across the Celtic world, villages erupted in a celebration so riotously alive, it seemed the earth itself was shaking off winter's grip. Beltane, the festival marking the start of summer, wasn't just about welcoming warmer days. It was a full-bodied invocation of fertility, passion, and the raw creative force of nature, with the maypole standing as its most potent symbol. Picture this, a towering ash or birch tree stripped of its branches, draped with ribbons as vibrant as new spring leaves, and planted deep into the earth like an axis between the worlds. As dancers wove those ribbons into intricate patterns, they weren't just performing a folk dance, they were reenacting the sacred union of earth and sky. The true genius of the maypole lies in its layers of meaning. The pole itself, a phallic symbol as unmistakable as it was unspoken, thrust into the ground with ritual precision. The wreath of flowers crowning it, a representation of the vulva, with dancers weaving the ribbons into a braid that symbolized consummation. This was sex magic disguised as recreation, a way for agrarian communities to channel nature's reproductive energy into their fields and flocks. Even the timing held cosmic significance. Beltane fires were lit when the Pleiades star cluster touched the horizon at midnight, a celestial signal that the veil between worlds was thin. But the festival's most subversive act was its survival. When Christianity swept through Europe, Beltane's overt paganism should have doomed it. Instead, it went underground quite literally. Villagers began burying their maypoles after use, hiding them in bogs to evade church authorities, only to resurrect them the following year. Flower crowns once meant to honor the goddess Flora were quietly rededicated to the Virgin Mary. The bonfires, now called St. John's fires, kept their old protective magic. Farmers still drove cattle between the flames for purification, though now they muttered Christian prayers over the crackling logs. Some traditions refused to bend. In Ireland, couples leaped over Beltane fires for luck in childbearing. a practice so stubbornly pagan that medieval priests lamented it in sermons. Welsh maidens washed their faces in dawn dew to ensure beauty, a ritual echoing ancient water goddess worship, and in the Scottish Highlands, the Cailleach, an effigy of the winter hag, was still symbolically burned, even as church officials decried it as devilry. Modern Beltane celebrations in places like Edinburgh's Calton Hill prove how deeply these symbols endure. Thousands gather to watch performers embody the Green Man and make Queen, their costumes a living bridge to the past. Neo-pagans have reclaimed the holiday's spiritual roots, while historians note how May Day's worker protests unconsciously echo Beltane's themes of renewal and rebellion. That innocent-looking maypole on your village green, it's far more than decor. It's a 1,000-year-old act of quiet resistance, a ribbon-wrapped rebellion whispering that some joys are too primal to ever be fully tamed. What makes Beltane extraordinary isn't just its longevity, but its adaptability. The same festival that once saw couples rolling in newly plowed fields for good luck now draws urbanites seeking connection to nature. The bonfires that once warded off malevolent fairies today light up Instagram feeds. Yet at its core, the message remains unchanged. Life always finds a way to rise again, whether through a seedling breaking ground, a child's birth, or a scarlet ribbon spiraling down a sunlit pole. Deep beneath the golden sands of Egypt's necropolises, the afterlife wasn't a given. It was a trial by celestial scales. The weighing of the heart, depicted in exquisite detail in the Book of the Dead, was the ancient Egyptians' ultimate judgment day, a moment where morality took physical form. Picture a dimly lit chamber in Juat, the underworld, where the deceased stands trembling before Osiris, flanked by 42 assessor gods. But the true arbiter isn't a deity, it's a single ostrich feather, the feather of Mat, goddess of truth and cosmic order. This delicate plume held more power than any sword, for it would determine whether a soul ascended to paradise or faced obliteration. The ritual was as precise as it was harrowing. A scribe priest, often Anubis or Thoth, would place the deceased's heart believed to house all memories and deeds onto one scale pan, while Mat's feather rested on the other. The tension in this moment was palpable. Hearts heavy with lies would sink, triggering Ammit the Devourer, a grotesque hybrid of crocodile, lion, and hippopotamus, to consume the organ in a single gulp, dooming the soul to non-existence. But a heart lighter than the feather, it meant the deceased had lived by Mat's principles: honesty, justice, and harmony. They'd earned the title True of Voice and passage to the field of reeds. Survival required preparation. Egyptians didn't leave this trial to chance. They crammed their tombs with amulets and spells. The most crucial was the heart scarab, a jade or obsidian beetle carved with chapter 30b of the Book of the Dead. "O my heart, do not betray me, do not stand against me as a witness." These words weren't poetry, they were legal defense meant to silence the heart's potential confessions. Some even buried alternative heart replacements, stone or faience substitutes just in case. But here's what's utterly fascinating. The scales weren't just about punishment. They reflected Egypt's nuanced view of ethics. Unlike later fire and brimstone judgments, the Egyptians acknowledged human complexity. Spells in the Book of the Dead allowed souls to deny specific sins. "I have not caused hunger, I have not stolen milk from a child's mouth," without claiming perfection. Archaeologists have found hearts in mummies stuffed with linen packets, likely containing written denials, proof of how literally they took this spiritual loophole. The legacy of this ritual echoes in unexpected places. Modern courtrooms with their scales of justice unknowingly mirror Osiris Hall, the concept of a heavy heart as guilt lingers in our language. Even the idea of a final judgment has roots in these painted papyri, but perhaps the most poignant lesson lies in Ammit herself. She wasn't a demon, just an instrument of balance. In a culture obsessed with eternity, the true horror wasn't punishment but becoming nothing.
a whisper from the past reminds us the weight of a life can't be faked, and some feathers tip the scales of forever. Now let's turn from the silence of the scales to a sound that shaped empires, the sacred hum of the Hindu Om. Beneath the Arctic's shifting ice floes, where the seawater burns with cold, lies a realm ruled by fury and grief. This is the domain of Sedna, the Inuit sea goddess, whose tangled hair and severed fingers birthed every creature that swims, and whose rage still churns the oceans into deadly storms. According to legend, Sedna was once a mortal woman betrayed by her father. When she refused to marry a suitor who was secretly a monstrous bird spirit, her own father threw her into the sea, hacking off her fingers as she clung desperately to the boat. Those fingers, sinking into the depths, transformed into whales, seals, and walruses, while Sedna herself became the mother and jailer of all marine life. But this isn't just a creation myth. It's a living treaty between humans and the unforgiving Arctic environment. Inuit shamans to this day perform grueling spirit journeys to comb the tangles from Sedna's hair, calming her storms and negotiating for good hunting. These rituals aren't symbolic, they're survival strategies. When sea ice thins unpredictably or seal populations vanish, communities blame Sedna's anger at broken taboos. Perhaps someone wasted meat or spoke disrespectfully of animals. The shaman's task to descend into the freezing water in a trance, their soul traveling to Sedna's bone-strewn lair, while their body remains tethered to the physical world by a thin rope held by villagers. The ceremonies are visceral. Elders describe shamans convulsing as if drowning, their breath coming in ragged gasps while they battle the goddess's wrath. Successful journeys end with Sedna releasing her grip on the animals, sometimes signaled by the sudden appearance of a seal through an ice hole. Failed attempts. Those bring blizzards or starvation. Archaeological evidence supports the tradition's antiquity. Thule-era hunting amulets carved from walrus ivory depict Sedna with sinewy hair, and oral histories tell of whole villages relocating after a shaman's warning from the depths. What makes Sedna's story extraordinary is how it mirrors climate change's stark reality. Modern Inuit hunters report thinner ice and erratic animal migrations, changes they often frame as Sedna withholding her bounty due to humanity's environmental sins. Scientists partnering with these communities note how the myth encodes precise ecological knowledge. Sedna's tangled hair represents marine pollution, while her storms echo the Arctic's warming-induced turbulence. Even the shaman's rope finds a parallel in modern safety harnesses worn by ice fishermen. The lesson here isn't about superstition versus science. It's about a culture that personified the ocean's volatility as a wounded deity, one who could be reasoned with if approached correctly. When a Greenlandic hunter whispers apologies to a seal before harvesting it, or a Nunavut elder forbids burning driftwood that might carry Sedna's hair, they're upholding a pact written in saltwater and blood. A reminder that some truths, no matter how ancient, never really sink beneath the waves. While most associate Rome with gladiators and emperors, few know about the nights when even the mighty empire trembled before its own dead. The Lemuria festival wasn't a celebration, it was an exorcism in reverse, a desperate bargain with the hungry ghosts lurking beneath the cobblestones. For 3 eerie days each May, the Roman calendar turned upside down. Homes fell silent at midnight as fathers, barefoot and clad only in tunics, performed a ritual so precise that a single misstep could invite disaster. First, they'd fill their mouths with black beans, not as food but as ransom. Then, walking backward to avoid meeting the gaze of any spirit, they'd spit the beans through the house while chanting, "With these I redeem myself and my family." Each bean was a stand-in for a living soul, tossed like coins to the underworld's toll collectors. The brilliance and terror of Lemuria lay in its contradictions. Romans believed their deceased ancestors, the lemures, could be both benevolent guardians and ravenous parasites. Neglected spirits transformed into larvae, skeletal wraiths that brought sickness and nightmares.
Archaeologists have found lead-cursed tablets buried under Roman thresholds, inscribed with pleas to restrain these restless ones. The festival's timing was no accident either. May was considered unlucky for marriages because it fell during Lemuria, when the veil between realms frayed like an old shroud. Even Rome's founding myths fed the dread. Remus, the slain twin of Romulus, was said to haunt the city as its original lemur, demanding vengeance through generations. What makes this tradition truly unsettling is how it mirrored Rome's darkest social hierarchies. Wealthy households hired professional ghost chasers to perform the ritual, while slaves risked beatings if they dropped a single bean. The poet Ovid describes mothers pressing amulets of dogs' teeth onto their children's cradles during Lemuria, a charm against infant-killing spirits. And in a grotesque twist, some scholars suggest the beans may have symbolized the severed heads of enemy warriors once offered to ancestral spirits in prehistoric times. Christianity didn't erase Lemuria, it absorbed it. When the Church established All Souls' Day in the 10th century, they set it in November but kept the core idea, feeding the dead to keep them at bay. Modern Italy's Festa dei Morti still features bean-shaped cookies, while Portugal's Pau por Deus sees children begging for soul cakes, both distant echoes of those midnight bean offerings. Even Halloween's Trick or Treat carries a whisper of Lemuria's transactional dread. Appeasement or suffer the consequences. The festival's legacy lingers in unexpected places. Psychologists recognize the backward walking as a form of exposure therapy, confronting trauma by reenacting it safely. Contemporary pagans have revived Lemuria as a time to honor shadowy ancestors, while horror films like A Ghost Story capture its essence with silent specters draped in sheets, forever watching from the corners of rooms. Rome may have fallen, but its ghosts still walk, especially on those moonless May nights when the old walls seem to breathe, and every tossed bean holds 1,000 years of whispered bargains. Imagine a battle where the weapons are made of powdered sunshine, crushed rubies, and petals ground into clouds, where every splash of color isn't just playful, but a defiant celebration of good's victory over evil. This is Holi, India's riotous festival of spring, where the streets explode into a kaleidoscope of pigments, and for one chaotic day, social hierarchies dissolve under a rainbow haze. But beneath the laughter and flying gulal powders lies a story older than the Mughal Empire, a tale of faith so unshakable, it walked through fire unscathed. At its heart, Holi commemorates the legend of Prahlad, the young devotee of Vishnu who survived his demonic aunt Holika's flames. According to the Bhagavata Purana, Holika had a boon making her immune to fire, or so she thought. When she sat in a pyre clutching Prahlad, intent on burning him alive for his unwavering faith, the divine tables turned. Flames consumed her instead, while Prahlad emerged untouched, his devotion shielding him like an invisible armor. The bonfires lit on Holi's Eve, called Holika Dahan, reenact this triumph, with effigies of Holika crackling to ash as crowds chant prayers against deceit and tyranny. But Holi isn't just about destruction, it's about rebirth. As dawn breaks, the solemnity of the fire gives way to exuberance. In Mathura, Lord Krishna's birthplace, the festival stretches for weeks, with Lathma Holi seeing women playfully beat men with sticks, reenacting Krishna's mischievous attempts to steal milkmaid's butter. Barsaana's mud and flower fights echo this romantic playfulness, while Punjab's Ola Mohalla contrasts the colors with martial arts displays by Sikh warriors. Even the shades tell stories, red for love and fertility, yellow for turmeric's healing power, green for spring's vitality. Modern Holi has spun this tradition into a global phenomenon. In Spain's La Tomatina-esque color run spin-offs, corporate teams toss eco-friendly pigments in team-building exercises. Universities from Sydney to Berlin host Bollywood-themed color parties, while chemists now craft non-toxic, skin-safe powders to replace the traditional and sometimes hazardous synthetic dyes.
Yet the soul of Holy remains unchanged, a momentary anarchy where a CEO might get drenched in blue by a street vendor, and for once no one objects. What makes Holy endure isn't just its visual spectacle, but its radical message. That joy can be a form of resistance, and that sometimes the most powerful way to confront darkness isn't with swords, but with a handful of radiant powder aimed straight at the heart of winter's gloom. High in the mist-wrapped Pyrenees, where Spain meets France, winter brings a visitor as ancient as the mountains themselves, a soot-streaked giant who smells of ash and carries the weight of centuries in his sack. The Olentzero, the Basque country's enigmatic Christmas figure, is no rosy-cheeked saint. With his tattered charcoal burner's clothes, clay pipe, and a face weathered by generations of storytelling, he descends from the hills each December bearing gifts and a secret history far older than the Nativity. This coal-blackened colossus began as a pagan winter spirit, a mythic embodiment of the solstice's dying light and returning warmth. Pre-Christian Basques believed the sun stood still at year's end, requiring rituals to coax it back. Villagers would light massive bonfires, some say with logs blessed by the Olentzero himself, while children left offerings of food at crossroads for this solitary figure who wandered between worlds. His name whispers his origins, Ol's time of darkness and arrow era, marking him as a herald of the year's turning. Christianity didn't erase the Olentzero, it reshaped him. When missionaries arrived, they couldn't uproot this deeply rooted figure, so they wove him into Christmas lore. By the Middle Ages, he'd transformed into a benevolent gift-giver, though his methods remained startlingly primal. Basque children were told he'd climb down chimneys not with toys, but with coal for good children to fuel their winter fires and onions for the naughty, a lingering echo of ancient scarcity myths. His sack, once said to carry the souls of the dead during solstice nights, now held wooden carvings and warm woolens. The Olentzero's survival is a masterclass in cultural adaptation. During Franco's dictatorship, when the Basque language and traditions were suppressed, the Olentzero became a clandestine symbol of resistance. Parents whispered his stories in Euskara, the Basque language, behind closed doors, and his effigies were secretly paraded through villages. Today, his revival is a point of regional pride. Modern Olentzero processions feature towering papier-mâché figures with movable jaws, their hollow eyes glowing as they sing traditional carols through hidden speakers. In Bilbao's Plaza Nueva, hundreds gather to watch him arrive by helicopter, a surreal blend of ancient myth and 21st century spectacle. What makes the Olentzero extraordinary isn't just his endurance, but his duality. He's both a warning and a welcome reminder of winter's harshness and the promise of its passing. His soot-stained face reflects the Basque people's own history, marked by hardship yet stubbornly joyful, a culture that turned coal into celebration. So when children in red berets leave cider and chestnuts by their hearths this December, they're not just awaiting gifts, they're keeping alive a flame that has burned in these mountains since the first snows fell. From his origins as a solstice phantom to his reinvention as a folk hero, the Olentzero proves that some traditions don't fade, they evolve, carrying the embers of the past into the future's cold night. At the stroke of the spring equinox, when day and night hang in perfect balance across the Persian world, homes transform into living altars of renewal. The Haft-Seen table isn't just decoration, it's a meticulously curated cosmology, where 7 items beginning with the Persian letter Seen become vessels for ancient hopes, fears, and the quiet magic of rebirth. Each object whispers a dialogue with nature, from the tender sabzeh wheat sprouts stretching toward sunlight to the golden glow of singed dried fruit, their wrinkled skins holding the sweetness of perseverance. Let's unravel this edible poetry piece by piece. The sabzeh isn't merely sprouts in a dish, it's the resurrection of the land itself, germinating weeks before Noel as families tend it like a prayer. In villages, they whisper to the shoots, believing their growth foretells the year's abundance. Next comes samanu, a dense pudding stirred for hours from wheat germ, its caramel hue symbolizing the alchemy of patience transforming raw struggle into nourishment. Then there's sear garlic, placed not for flavor but as a ward against the evil eye, its pungent presence a reminder that protection often comes in unglamorous forms. The table's centerpiece, sumac berries, grinds into a crimson powder representing the sunrise's fire, while sirke vinegar carries the tang of life's inevitable ferment, both joy and sorrow aged into wisdom. Golden-singed wild olives dangle like tiny promises, their sweetness emerging only after weathering time's harshness. And finally, the ceiba, an apple rests polished to a shine, not just for health but as an emblem of Edenic purity, its roundness mirroring the eternal return of seasons. But the haft-scene's true brilliance lies in its fluid symbolism. Modern tables might include coins seke for prosperity or hyacinth sonbol for spring's scent, blending tradition with contemporary hopes. In wartime Tehran, families added a mirror to reflect candlelight and perhaps their own resilience. Afghan refugees carry miniature haft-scene setups in camps, using painted stones when fruit is scarce. Archaeologists trace this ritual's roots to Zoroastrianism, where the number 7 represented the Amesha Spenta divine emanations. The Achaemenid Empire's spring festivals featured similar displays, with cuneiform tablets describing 7 stalks offered to the 7 winds. When Islam arrived, the tradition absorbed Quranic elements like placing the holy book beside the table without shedding its pagan heart. Today, as Kurdish villagers in Turkey leap over bonfires shouting, "My yellowness to you, your redness to me," and Iranian astronauts aboard the International Space Station float toward a weightless haft-scene, this 3,000-year-old practice proves its astonishing adaptability. It's not about preserving the past in amber, but letting it grow like those ever-reaching wheat sprouts rooted deep, yet always straining toward the light. Somewhere in the red heart of Australia, where the earth cracks open in dry riverbeds and sandstone monoliths glow like embers at sunset, the land itself remembers. It remembers the rainbow serpent carving valleys with her sinuous body, the ancestral kangaroo men leaping across the horizon, and the emu women whose footprints became watering holes. These aren't just stories to the Aboriginal peoples, they're living maps, legal documents, and sacred texts woven together in what's known as Dreamtime, or as some communities call it, the dreaming. This tradition doesn't just explain the world, it continuously creates it, binding past, present, and future in an unbroken thread of memory and responsibility. Take the rainbow serpent, known by many names, Ungaliod to the Kunwinj, Ku, Wajil to the Noongar, a being so vast her movements shaped the very bones of the continent. When she slid across the barren earth in the dreaming, her belly carved out the Murray River, her coils raised the Kimberley Ranges, and where she paused to rest, her body left permanent curves in the landscape. But this isn't merely poetic geology. To the Yolngu people of Arnhem Land, the serpent isn't a metaphor, she's a living presence. Certain waterholes are her sacred resting places, and disturbing them isn't just taboo, it's believed to bring floods or drought. When elders point to a twisted gum tree and say, "That's where the rainbow serpent changed direction," they're not sharing folklore, they're reciting territorial law, ecological wisdom, and spiritual doctrine in one breath. Dreamtime stories function with startling precision. The Wardaman people's tale of the fire-wielding lightning brothers explains not just the striations on the rocks near Catherine Gorge, but also dictates seasonal firestick farming practices still used to prevent wildfires. In Central Australia, the Seven Sisters songline, a dreaming story about celestial women fleeing a pursuer, maps a navigational route stretching thousands of kilometers, with each rock formation and water source corresponding to a verse. European settlers initially dismissed these narratives as myths, until archaeologists realized songlines often marked hidden desert wells or ancient trade routes.
Even modern pilots have reported that following Aboriginal songline descriptions helped them navigate when instruments failed. What makes Dreamtime unique is its fluid temporality. Unlike fixed mythologies, these stories are constantly reinterpreted. When a new road cuts through sacred land, elders might incorporate its existence into the dreaming narrative, treating it as part of the eternal cycle rather than an interruption. During the British nuclear tests at Maralinga in the 1950s, Pitjantjatjara elders described the mushroom clouds as manifestations of the Mamu, malevolent spirits from their existing cosmology, a way to process unprecedented trauma through ancient frameworks. The survival of these traditions despite centuries of suppression is nothing short of miraculous. When missionaries banned Dreamtime ceremonies, Aboriginal artists hid sacred symbols inside dot paintings marketed as abstract art. When children were forcibly removed from families during the stolen generations, elders whispered dreaming stories through prison camp fences using stick charts drawn in the dirt. Today, these narratives are experiencing a renaissance, with digital animators collaborating with elders to create virtual reality songlines, while rangers blend dreaming ecology with Western science to manage national parks. But perhaps the most profound lesson lies in how Dreamtime resolves the false divide between humans and nature. When a Darol elder says the lyrebird's song contains the voices of all the forest's creatures because it witnessed the world's creation, they're asserting a truth Western science is only now acknowledging, that every organism carries deep time within it. Those sandstone cliffs aren't just rock, they're the frozen tears of ancestral beings. That seasonal flood isn't random, it's the rainbow serpent stirring in her sleep. In a world grappling with climate collapse, Dreamtime offers something radical, the idea that the land isn't property but family, and you don't exploit family, you listen to their stories. When the midsummer sun lingers at its highest peak over the Baltic forests, an impossible flower blooms for just one fleeting moment, a golden flash of petals said to glow like captured moonlight. This is the legendary fern flower of Jonines, a Slavic and Baltic tradition so ancient it predates written history, yet still draws couples into moonlit thickets every June. The rules are simple but urgent. At the stroke of midnight, as St. John's Eve tips into St. John's Day, lovers must plunge into the woods unaccompanied, barefoot to feel the earth's whispers and find the blossom before dawn. Success promises not just romance but fortune beyond imagining, the ability to understand animal speech, reveal hidden treasures, or bind two souls eternally. But here's the catch: ferns don't flower. Botanically, they reproduce via spores, yet for thousands of years people have sworn they've seen it, a luminous aberration pulsing between the fronds, vanishing if you blink. This paradox lies at the heart of the ritual. The fern flower isn't a plant, it's a threshold. Baltic pagans associated it with the love goddess Lotta and the fertility god Kupala, celebrating the summer solstice as a time when cosmic energies aligned. Young couples would weave flower crowns, then leap over bonfires hand in hand, the flames purifying their intentions. Christian missionaries later grafted the feast of St. John the Baptist onto these rites, but the old magic refused to fade. In Lithuania, villagers still call it Rosso's Dew Festival, collecting dawn-drenched herbs believed to gain healing powers on this night. Latvians tie oak leaf wreaths to doors, while Estonians light floating lanterns on lakes, each variation honoring the same truth, that midsummer is a crack in ordinary time. The flower quest's endurance speaks to its psychological brilliance. Unlike passive fortune-telling, it demands active participation, a shared adventure that tests compatibility. Folk songs describe men wading through brambles to protect their partners from the lorms, seductive forest spirits who untie braids to mark their victims. Women, in turn, are said to gain intuition to distinguish true suitors from tricksters. Modern psychologists note how the tradition externalizes relationship anxieties. Will we get lost? Can we trust each other in the dark? And resolves them through collaborative problem solving.
Even the failure to find the flower carries wisdom. Those who return empty-handed often realize their bond wasn't strong enough to warrant the flower's blessings. Archaeology confirms the ritual's deep roots. Neolithic amber carvings from the Baltic region show fern-like patterns, possibly early talismans. Medieval chronicles describe Teutonic knights being baffled by locals who danced around ferns like possessed. Most remarkably, the tradition survived Soviet suppression when pagan practices were banned. Families covertly taught children fern lore by hiding paper flowers in books, a quiet rebellion against enforced atheism. Today, urban Lithuanians might post #fern flower selfies, but the old warnings persist. Don't look back during your search, or malevolent deities will divert you. Some say the flower appears only to those pure of heart or reckless enough to dare the impossible. As dawn breaks over the Baltic each June 24th, you'll find couples emerging from the trees, hair tangled with leaves, feet damp with dew. Whether they clutch real flowers or just the memory of golden light, the outcome matters less than the shared journey. Because in the end, the fern flower's true power was never about magic. It was about the moment two people choose to step into the unknown together, believing in something too improbable to name. The stone arena echoes with a sound unlike any other sport. The thunderous bounce of a solid rubber ball weighing nearly 9 pounds, a sound that once signaled not just a game, but a battle for the fate of the cosmos. This was the Mayan ball game, known as pits in classical Mayan, a ritual so much more than competition. Imagine players clad in padded cotton armor, their hips and thighs bruised from deflecting the ball with bone-crushing force, all beneath the watchful eyes of gods and kings. The courts themselves were no ordinary playing fields. They were portals to the underworld, their towering stone walls carved with scenes of decapitation and rebirth, their dimensions precisely aligned with the movements of Venus and the Sun. At first glance, the rules seem straightforward. Teams kept the ball in play without using hands or feet, ricocheting it off hips, elbows, and knees through stone hoops mounted high on the walls. But every detail carried cosmic weight. The ball represented the sun's journey across the sky, its rubber sourced from sacred Yule trees believed to bleed divine sap. The playing field mirrored the Mayan creation myth, where the hero twins defeated the lords of Xibalba, the underworld, in a legendary ball game that restored order to the universe. To play was to reenact this primal struggle, and sometimes to pay its price. The stakes were terrifyingly real. While not every match ended in sacrifice, glyphs at sites like Chichen Itza depict victorious players holding the severed heads of opponents, their blood becoming ceremonial offerings. Some scholars argue that losers, or perhaps captives forced to play, faced ritual decapitation, their skulls placed in the court's foundation as spiritual mortar. At El Tajan, reliefs show a player kneeling beside the ball, his chest split open as a priest extracts his still beating heart. Yet there's a twist. Being chosen for sacrifice was also an honor, a direct ticket to the afterlife as a companion to the gods. What's often overlooked is the game's astronomical precision. At Kapan, the ball court aligns so that during equinoxes, the shadow of a macaw-headed marker slithers like a serpent along the playing surface, a nod to Kukulkan, the feathered serpent deity. In Yucatan, the great ball court of Chichen Itza possesses uncanny acoustics. A whisper at one end can be heard clearly over 400 feet away, possibly mimicking the voices of spirits. Even the ball's trajectory held meaning. A successful shot through the hoop was so rare the rings were barely wider than the ball that it likely ended the game instantly, symbolizing a celestial event like Venus crossing the sun. Modern descendants of the game, like Ulama, still played in rural Mexico, retain echoes of this sacred legacy. Players smear the rubber ball with copal incense before matches, and victories are celebrated with rituals thanking the ancestors. Meanwhile, archaeologists continue uncovering hidden ball courts beneath jungle canopies.
their stone glyphs revealing unexpected twists such as evidence of women's teams, challenging old assumptions about gender roles in Mayan spirituality. The deeper genius of pits lies in its duality. It was both sport and scripture, physics and faith, where a single bounce could mean glory or annihilation. Those stone hoops still stand today, silent sentinels of a worldview that saw no divide between the physical and spiritual, only the endless, deadly dance of the ball, the stars, and the sacrifices that bound them together. When the final stroke of midnight echoes through Scotland's frost-laced valleys, it's not champagne corks popping that signal the new year. It's the hurried footsteps of a stranger crossing your threshold, his arms laden with coal, shortbread, and a dram of whiskey. This is First Footing, the heart of Hogmanay, Scotland's Viking-steeped New Year celebration where the first person to enter your home after midnight sets the tone for the coming year. But not just anyone will do. The ideal first footer is a dark-haired man, preferably tall and handsome, carrying symbolic gifts that weave together survival, sweetness, and warmth. The tradition's roots stretch back to the Norse invasions, when a sudden knock at the door by a fair-haired stranger might mean a Viking raiding party. Over time, this ancestral anxiety transformed into its opposite. A dark-haired visitor became an omen of good fortune, his offerings, coal to keep the hearth lit, food to ensure abundance, whiskey to toast joy, acting as a charm against winter's hunger. The rituals surrounding first footing are as precise as they are poetic. The first footer must enter empty-handed, then present his gifts, never the reverse, so luck flows inward. Some households still insist the visitor circle the hearth 3 times before speaking, a holdover from sun-worshipping customs. In Shetland, where Norse influence runs deepest, first footers might recite a blessing in Norn, the extinct Scandinavian language once spoken there. The gifts themselves are non-negotiable. A lump of coal so black it's called black gold in Scots dialect, shortbread shaped like the sun's rays, and whiskey aged at least 12 years. Anything younger insults the household's dignity. Forget these at your peril. One Aberdeenshire tale tells of a man who brought salt instead of coal and was blamed for a year of flooded mines. But Hogmanay's fire isn't confined to hearths. In Stonehaven, just south of Aberdeen, the streets blaze with fireballs swinging, a spectacle that would make any safety officer shudder. Locals stuff wire cages with flammable material, once peat soaked in whale oil, now paraffin-soaked rags, then whirl them on chains through the midnight streets, creating meteor-like arcs of flame. This isn't just pyrotechnic bravado, it's a purification rite, the fireballs symbolizing the sun's return and banishing stagnant energy. The Vikings likely brought this practice to Scotland, where it merged with Celtic sun rituals. Today's participants train for months to avoid setting their kilts alight, their faces streaked with soot as they parade past crowds shouting, "Hoard your fireball high." What makes Hogmanay extraordinary is how it absorbs history without erasing it. The Viking Yule celebrations, which once lasted for months, were compressed into a single night by medieval church authorities, yet the old gods linger in details like the clavig, a Shetland tradition where young men dress as mythical figures and demand entry to homes. Even Edinburgh's famed street party, a modern addition, nods to the past with its torchlight procession echoing ancient solstice festivals. The true magic of first footing lies in its communal alchemy. For one night, social hierarchies dissolve. A CEO might play first footer to a janitor's family, fulfilling an egalitarian ideal older than Scotland itself. And if your first footer stumbles drunk or drops the coal, well, there's always next year, or as the Scots say, lang may your lum reek, long may your chimney smoke, a wish for enduring warmth and kinship. In the swirling dust of a Yoruba village square, the air itself seems to shiver as the first rustle of indigo cloth appears at the road's end. This is no ordinary procession. It's the arrival of the Egungun, the ancestral masquerades that bridge the worlds of the living and the dead. Draped in layer upon layer of sacred Aso oak fabric, some panels older than the great-grandparents they honor, the dancer beneath becomes a vessel, his every movement channeling generations of wisdom, warnings, and blessings. To call these costumes mere disguises would be like calling a hurricane a breeze. These are living archives, each fold and stitch imbued with meaning. The outermost layers might dazzle with elaborate embroidery representing the ancestor's status, while hidden inner linings contain fragments of the deceased's actual clothing or even strands of hair binding spirit to wearer. The masquerade's power lies in its sacred duality. When the Egungun's bell-covered staff strikes the earth, the community doesn't just see a masked figure, they encounter the literal return of lineage. In Oyo traditions, certain Egungun types like the Elaragbo appear only once every decade, their costumes incorporating hundreds of strips of fabric donated by families seeking ancestral intervention. The most revered, the Eku, wear trailing robes so long they require attendants to unfold them like human scrolls, revealing patches from weddings, funerals, and wars that map a family's entire history across cloth. Witnesses often collapse in tears when recognizing a late mother's headwrap or a warrior father's battle sash woven into the design. But this isn't just about remembrance, it's judicial theater of the highest order. The Egungun serve as divine arbiters, particularly in the Geled societies of the Yoruba diaspora. When disputes fester unresolved, the masked figures emerge to speak in guttural, otherworldly tones achieved through sacred voice modifiers called ago. Their pronouncements carry the weight of collective memory. To defy an Egungun's ruling is to reject ancestral authority itself. During the 1940s in Abeokuta, recorded cases exist of land feuds settled when rival families' Egungun masks miraculously embraced during performance, compelling the living to reconcile. The rituals surrounding the masquerades reveal breathtaking complexity. Before dawn on festival days, the chosen dancer undergoes spiritual baths with herbs like Uyoro leaves to cool his soul for possession. The mask itself, often carved from Iroko, wood so dense it's said to withstand centuries, is stored in a consecrated grove where only initiates may approach. Modern spectrographic analysis of some ancient Egungun fabrics at the Lagos National Museum revealed traces of palm wine, indigo, and powdered camwood in the fibers, suggesting ceremonial anointing passed down through generations of caretakers. Perhaps most astonishing is how these traditions adapt without dilution. In contemporary Brooklyn Egungun societies, costumes incorporate discarded denim and repurposed Kent cloth, while the mask's hollow eyes now sometimes glow with LED lights during night processions. Yet the core purpose remains unchanged when the Egungun's swirling fabrics brush against a weeping child in the crowd. That momentary contact is believed to transfer ancestral protection, no less potent than when Yoruba civilization first rose from the Red Earth. The masks don't just honor the dead, they insist the departed walk beside us still, their wisdom stitched into every trembling fold of cloth. When the winter winds howl like wounded beasts through the blackened branches of Germanic forests, something more than storms rides the gale. This is the Wild Hunt Watten's ghostly cavalcade, a tempest of lost souls and spectral hounds that tears across the sky, their passing marked by thunder, snowfall, and the panicked flight of animals. To witness it isn't just bad luck, it's a cosmic trespass, punishable by being swept into their endless procession or cursed with a year of calamities. At the heart of this myth stands Odin, the All-Father, though here he wears a darker mantle. As Wotan, the storm-charged leader of the hunt, he's depicted astride Sleipnir, his eight-legged steed, his cloak billowing like storm clouds, his one eye blazing with celestial fire. But this isn't the wise wanderer of runestones and mead halls. This is a god unshackled, leading an army of the dishonored dead, their faces frozen in eternal screams. Medieval texts describe their ranks swelling with historical figures. Frederick Barbarossa, Charlemagne, even unbaptized children, all condemned to ride until Judgment Day. The hunt's path isn't random. It follows ley lines between ancient burial mounds, crumbling castles, and lightning-struck oaks, tracing scars left by forgotten wars. The terror of the wild hunt lies in its ambiguity. Some traditions claim it's an omen of famine or war, while others say it scours the land of evil, a divine purge masked as horror. In the Harz Mountains, villagers once hid their children during winter storms, fearing the hunt would mistake them for wayward spirits. Norse skalds wove protective verses into their poetry, like the Bergen charm. I carve hedge runes to turn the hunt's hunger, may their fury strike the tall pines, not my roof. Even nature conspires to warn the living. Foxes shriek in unison before the hunt arrives, and hearth fires burn blue without wind. Archaeology suggests these legends emerged from real survival strategies. Dendrochronology reveals that the worst European famines, like the Great Frost of 1709, coincided with spikes in wild hunt folklore, as if communities personified their suffering. Excavated amulets from Viking Age Scandinavia depict Sleipnir surrounded by zigzagging lines, possibly representing the aurora borealis, which was said to be the hunt's bridle straps snapping in the wind. Modern echoes persist. In 1965, Swiss mountaineers near the Aletsch Glacier reported hearing 1,000 horses during a blizzard, though no tracks appeared at dawn. Meteorologists now speculate the phenomenon could originate from infrasound low-frequency vibrations produced by storms that trigger primal fear. Yet for all our scientific explanations, the instinct to shutter windows during a winter gale remains. The hunt's true power isn't in its reality, but in the way it forces us to confront the oldest truth. Some nights the storm isn't just weather. It's a warning to stay inside, stay small, and pray the riders don't know your name. Transitioning from spectral storms to tangible terrors, we encounter a tradition where the dead don't just ride, they reach back. The Slavic belief in revenants, or vampiric undead, reveals how folklore grappled with disease long before modern medicine could name it. But that's a tale for another night when the wind stops howling. High in the sacred reaches of Mount Beekdu, where the mists cling like the breath of gods, a myth was born, not from the union of man and woman, but from bear and divinity. The Korean foundation story of Dangun isn't just a folk tale. It's the spiritual DNA of a nation, woven into festivals, political rhetoric, and even the daily greeting Hongik Gan, to live for the benefit of all, a phrase ascribed to the legendary first king himself. It begins with a celestial being named Hwanung, son of the Lord of Heaven, who descended to earth with 3 heavenly seals and 3,000 followers. But this wasn't just a divine field trip. His arrival marked a cosmic experiment. Hwanung sought to prove that humans could govern themselves with heavenly principles. Enter Unnayo, a bear who longed to become human. Along with a tiger, she prayed daily beneath a sacred sandalwood tree, eating only mugwort and garlic for 21 days, a trial of transformation. The tiger gave up, but the bear persevered, morphing into a woman. When Hwanung took her as his bride, their son Dangun would go on to establish Gojoseon in 2333 BC, Korea's legendary first kingdom. This myth isn't locked away in dusty scrolls. It pulses through modern Korea like a heartbeat. Every October 3rd, Gichanjeol National Foundation Day sees ceremonies at shrines like Seoul's Dangun Seongjeon, where offerings of rice wine and pine branches honor the bear woman's sacrifice. School children reenact the myth, their paper tiger masks contrasting with brown bear costumes, while historians debate the real-world parallels. Some linking Unnayo to ancient bear-worshipping tribes of Manchuria, others to shamanic traditions where bears symbolized maternal protection. The bear's symbolism runs deeper than mere folklore. In Korean primal religion, bears were considered psychopomps, guides between worlds, and their hibernation cycles mirrored ideas of death and rebirth. Archaeologists excavating Neolithic sites have found bear figurines with deliberately broken paws,
possibly ritual objects used in rites petitioning strength or fertility. Even the mugwort and garlic from the myth aren't random. Traditional medicine still prizes them as detoxifiers, suggesting the story encodes ancient health wisdom. What makes Dangun's legend extraordinary is its political adaptability. In the early 1900s, Korean independence fighters invoked Dangun to resist Japanese colonial rule, circulating clandestine copies of the Samguk Yusa chronicles that preserved the myth. Later, both North and South Korea weaponized the narrative. Pyongyang claims Mount Baekdu as the revolutionary birthplace of Kim Jong-il, while Seoul's annual foundation ceremonies emphasized democratic values as Hwanung's legacy. Yet despite these competing claims, the core message endures: resilience, the bear's transformation; patience, the 21-day trial; and divine mandate tempered by earthly struggle. Modern celebrations blend antiquity with pop culture. K-dramas like Arthur Chronicles reimagine the bear woman as a feminist icon, while Jeju Island's indigenous Hineo divers still perform rituals to Unnayo for safe sea passage. Scientists even jokingly call the Korean tendency to endure hardship Gamiho patience, comparing it to the bear's ordeal. On Ganghwa Island, the alleged site of Dangun's altar, visitors touch a weathered stone pillar said to radiate the energy of that primordial union. Whether you believe the myth or not, its power is undeniable. After all, 5,000 years later, an entire nation still traces its identity back to a bear who refused to give up. When the Andes Mountains cast their longest shadows across the sacred valley, the Inca Empire would hold its breath, waiting to see if their sun god Inti chose to return from his winter retreat. Inti Raymi, the festival of the sun, wasn't just a solstice celebration. It was a high-stakes cosmic negotiation where priests, dancers, and the Sapa Inca himself performed an elaborate ritual drama to convince the sun to reverse its southward flight. Imagine Cusco's main plaza at dawn on June 21st, the air thin and biting, as thousands gathered to watch the sunrise strike a ceremonial golden pillar called the Intihuatana, the hitching post of the sun. If the shadows aligned perfectly, the crowd erupted in relief. Inti had accepted their pleas and would begin his journey back to nourish the crops. The preparations for this spectacle were as precise as they were extravagant. For weeks beforehand, runners called chasquis carried torches lit from the temple of the sun's eternal flame to every corner of Tahuantinsuyu, the Inca realm. Priests examined llama entrails for omens, while chosen women, the Aklakuna, wove sacred textiles using gold threads to clad the sun god's effigy. At dawn on the solstice, the Sapa Inca would raise 2 golden goblets of chicha, the ritual corn beer, one offered to Inti, the other poured into a stone channel that carried it underground, symbolizing the sun drinking the earth's essence. Then came the climax, the sacrifice of flawless black llamas, their hearts offered to Pachamama Mother Earth and lungs held toward the sun to absorb its revitalizing breath. What set Inti Raymi apart from other sun rituals was its brilliant theatrics. A massive golden disc representing Inti was paraded on a litter so polished it blinded onlookers, flanked by nobles wearing headdresses that mimicked the sun's rays. Dancers in jaguar pelts and condor feathers performed the Haile, a stomping victory dance, while priests chanted astronomical equations that predicted eclipse cycles. The Incas' understanding of celestial mechanics was so advanced that their solstice calculations often matched modern astronomy to within minutes. Archaeologists studying the Coricancha Sun Temple found that its trapezoidal windows align not only with the solstice sunrise but also with the rising of the Pleiades, a star cluster the Inca called Kulka, signaling the agricultural calendar. The Spanish conquest tried to eradicate Inti Raymi, branding it demonic idolatry. But like the sun itself, the tradition proved indomitable. Indigenous communities secretly preserved elements as Yaka Aspi, a canal cleaning ritual that masked solar veneration under colonial radar.
In 1944, Peruvian intellectuals revived Inti Raymi as a historical pageant, blending Inca choreography with Quechua poetry. Today's Cusco festival swells with 500,000 spectators who watch actors portraying the Sapa Inca deliver a speech in Quechua from Sacsayhuaman's megalithic fortress. While the llamas are now symbolic and the golden disc a replica, the essence remains unchanged, an entire city holding its breath as dawn breaks over the Andes, willing the light to return. Modern astronomers note how the Inca solstice markers still function with eerie precision, their stone observatories outlasting the empire that built them. Meanwhile, Andean farmers quietly maintain the old ways, offering coca leaves to mountain spirits during the June frosts. The true lesson of Inti Raymi isn't just in its grandeur, but in its resilience, a civilization that fused science and spirituality so seamlessly that even conquest couldn't extinguish its light. When the first solstice rays hit Cusco's ancient stones each winter, they illuminate more than ruins. They reveal a covenant between earth and sky that no empire could sever. From the high Andes, we journey to the misty valleys of Japan, where another solstice tradition transforms the act of writing into a sacred purification ritual. But that's a tale written in water and ink in the dim glow of a candlelit room, where the smell of burning sage mingles with whispered prayers. Something shifts in the air, a presence that doesn't belong. This is the moment when a dibuk, according to Jewish mysticism, makes itself known. Unlike the demons of other traditions, a dibuk isn't some foreign evil spirit. It's the soul of a deceased person, trapped between worlds, clinging to the living in a desperate attempt to finish unresolved business. The word itself comes from the Hebrew davak, meaning to cling. And that's precisely what these entities do, latching onto a host with a grip that's as much psychological as it is supernatural. Kabbalistic texts describe dibuks as souls burdened by such profound sin or trauma in life that they're barred from the afterlife. Denied peace, they seek refuge in another's body, often targeting individuals who share their vulnerabilities or who are spiritually vulnerable themselves. The signs aren't always dramatic. A sudden aversion to sacred objects, unexplained knowledge of forgotten languages, or a personality shift so stark that loved ones swear they're speaking to a stranger. But in extreme cases, the dibuk's voice emerges rasping, desperate, and utterly unlike the host's own. Exorcising a dibuk isn't a matter of holy water and incantations. It's a meticulous, often harrowing process steeped in Kabbalah's intricate cosmology. A rabbi trained in these rituals, usually a Baal Shem, or master of divine names, begins by isolating the afflicted and fasting alongside them, creating a space of heightened spiritual tension. Then comes the interrogation. The dibuk is addressed directly, commanded to reveal its name, its sins, and the reason for its attachment. This isn't just for diagnosis. In Jewish tradition, knowing a spirit's true name grants power over it. The climax unfolds with the blowing of the shofar, its piercing blast said to destabilize the dibuk's hold, followed by the recitation of psalms and the eventual command to depart in the name of heavenly courts. One of the most famous cases occurred in 16th century Safed, where the mystic Rabbi Isaac Luria documented a dibuk tormenting a young bride. The spirit, a man who'd committed adultery and died unrepentant, confessed through her mouth before being expelled into a clay vessel which was then shattered, a symbolic release of his trapped soul. Similar accounts appear in Sefer Hasidim, medieval texts where dibuks serve as cautionary tales about moral accountability. But the dibuk's legacy extends far beyond religious texts. In the early 20th century, playwright S. Ansky immortalized the phenomenon in the dibuk, a haunting drama where a young woman, Lee, becomes possessed by the soul of her murdered lover. The play's premiere in Warsaw ignited a cultural fascination, blending Ashkenazi folklore with modernist theater. Productions still use eerie staging, Lee's voice distorting mid-sentence, her body contorting as if pulled by invisible strings, to mirror the dibuk's duality, part tragedy, part horror.
Modern psychology offers its own lens. Some scholars suggest Dybbuk possessions mirror dissociative identity disorder, where trauma fractures the self into distinct personas. Others see them as metaphors for generational guilt, particularly in post-Holocaust literature, where Dybbuks embody memories too painful to bury. Even contemporary exorcisms persist quietly in ultra-Orthodox communities, where rabbis field requests for help from those convinced they harbor a restless soul. What makes the Dybbuk uniquely compelling is its moral ambiguity. Unlike purely malevolent spirits, it's a figure of profound pathos, a soul so tangled in its own suffering that it inflicts pain on others. The exorcism isn't just about expulsion, it's about redemption, offering the Dybbuk a chance to confront its past and finally move on. In a world where ghosts so often represent fear, the Dybbuk reminds us that sometimes the most haunting thing isn't the presence of the dead, but the unfinished business they leave behind. From the hushed intensity of a rabbi's study to the spotlight of a Broadway stage, the Dybbuk's tale endures because it speaks to a universal truth, that the past never truly leaves us. It lingers, whispers, and when ignored can take root in the most unexpected ways. Imagine standing in the prow of a voyaging canoe, staring into the endless Pacific expanse when suddenly your hook snags something unimaginable. Not a fish, not a shark, but the very ocean floor itself, buckling and rising until new land erupts from the depths. This was no fisherman's tall tale to the Polynesians. It was the epic of Maui, the trickster demigod whose magical fish hook, Manaiakalani, didn't just catch dinner, it hauled entire islands into existence. The legend unfolds with Maui's cunning and audacity. Using the jawbone of his ancestors, some say his grandmothers, others claim a fallen warrior's, he fashioned a hook imbued with mana, the spiritual essence of creation. His brothers, annoyed by his arrogance, refused to share their bait, so Maui punched his own nose, smearing the hook with his divine blood. As he cast it into the sea, he chanted a spell so potent it reached the ocean's darkest trenches. The hook snared the submerged continent of Te Ika Amoy, the fish of Maui, today known as New Zealand's North Island. With supernatural strength, Maui hauled it to the surface, its peaks becoming mountains, its valleys cradling rivers, while his brother's frantic paddling carved the island's jagged coastline. But here's where the myth blurs brilliantly with reality. To Polynesian navigators, Maui's hook wasn't just folklore, it was a celestial map. The constellation Scorpio, called Maui's fish hook across the Pacific, mirrors the hook's curve in the stars, its brightest point, Antares, marking where the line would pierce the sea. Oral traditions even encode sailing directions. Hawaiian chants describe Maui straining the line toward Hana. Maui, where the hook's mythical resting place, Kali, remains one of the Pacific's richest fishing grounds. Modern sonar scans reveal submerged ridges matching the legend's descriptions, ancient volcanic chains that could have inspired tales of land being dragged from the deep. The hook's legacy extends beyond geography. In Tahiti, fishermen still whisper Maui's name for luck, their lures carved in the hook's distinctive crescent shape. Maori Tohunga priests used bone replicas in rituals to fish for knowledge from the spirit world. Even Hawaii's Kilauea eruptions were said to be Maui stirring his hook, reminding mortals of creation's unfinished work. When European missionaries dismissed the story as pagan fantasy, Polynesians pointed to the evidence around them, New Zealand's fault lines where the fish still seems to writhe with earthquakes, or the way currents swirl at Rarotonga, said to be the hook's drag marks. What makes Maui's feat extraordinary isn't just its scale, but its insight. These weren't primitive imaginations, they were keen observers who saw landforms as active participants in a living cosmos. The hook wasn't a weapon, it was a tool of balance, its power derived from ancestry tapu in Maori and sacrifice Maui's blood. Today, as rising seas threaten Pacific islands, the legend takes on new urgency. Activists invoke Maui's hook as a metaphor for climate resilience, a call to fish up solutions from ancestral wisdom. The demigod's lesson endures: the ocean gives, but only to those who respect its depths. From star maps to seismic truths, Maui's hook reminds us that some myths don't just explain the world, they anchor us to it, a lifeline cast across centuries. And if you listen closely to the waves, you might still hear the creak of that celestial line, taut with the weight of islands yet to rise. Armenian summers reach their peak in a riotous explosion of laughter, soaked clothing, and water flung with wild abandon. Welcome to Vardavar, the festival where no one stays dry and even strangers become allies in joyful chaos. But beneath the surface of this modern water fight lies a current of history so deep. It stretches back to the pagan love goddess Asgik, and the earliest Christian missionaries struggled to redirect ancient devotion. Picture the scene. In the cobbled streets of Yerevan, children chase giggling tourists with buckets. Office workers pause their commutes to be drenched by giggling grandmothers, and even stoic policemen grin as they receive impromptu showers. This isn't just a refreshing escape from July heat, it's Armenia's living memory in liquid form. The roots of Vardavar twist through time like vines on an ancient church wall. Long before Christianity reached the Armenian highlands, the people celebrated Asgik, goddess of love and water, whose tears were said to form the country's sacred springs. During midsummer, priests of her cult would lead processions to waterfalls, scattering rose petals vard in Armenian into the rushing streams while young couples bathed together, believing the waters blessed their unions. The festival's name itself carries this floral legacy. Vardavar likely derives from vard, rose, and var, to burn, possibly referencing fiery midsummer bonfires that once lit the celebrations. Archaeologists have unearthed bronze Asgik figurines near Lake Sevan, their hands cupped to pour water, suggesting rituals far older than written records. When Christianity took hold in the early 4th century, the Church faced a dilemma: how to redirect this deeply ingrained devotion without provoking rebellion. Their solution was theological alchemy. They superimposed the Feast of the Transfiguration onto the pagan festival, recasting the water as a symbol of Christ's radiant transformation on Mount Tabor. The timing was masterful. By placing the new holiday 50 days after Easter mirroring Asgik's midsummer date, they allowed the people to keep their beloved traditions while redirecting their focus. Medieval Armenian manuscripts depict priests blessing water barrels beside altars draped with roses, a visual compromise between old and new beliefs. But Vardavar's true genius lies in its social leveling. For one day each year, Armenia's strict hierarchies dissolve in the splash of water. In rural villages, it's customary for young women to douse marriage prospects, a playful test of good humor that echoes Asgik's matchmaking legacy. During Soviet times, when religious expression was suppressed, Vardavar became a covert act of cultural resistance, with families using the water fights to secretly baptize babies in public squares. Today, the festival has blossomed into a national therapy session, a chance for a nation shaped by genocide and geopolitical strife to reclaim joy. Psychologists note how post-war generations particularly embrace the ritual, their laughter washing away unspoken traumas. The preparations reveal fascinating syncretism. On Festival Eve, many Armenians still place bowls of rosewater on their windowsills to catch the morning dew, a practice straight from Asgik's worship. Churches now hold special water blessings where priests add rose oil to holy water, while in Gyumri, artisans craft elaborate water guns from hollowed-out gourds just as their ancestors did. The most devout follow an old rule: you must accept every dousing with grace, for the water carries blessings proportional to your willingness to receive them. Modern Vardavar pulses with this layered meaning. Tourists might see only a massive water fight, but watch closely. Near Echmiadzin in Cathedral, elderly women carefully soak the church walls, reviving a pagan practice meant to cool sacred spaces against evil spirits. In vanity-conscious Los Angeles, where the diaspora celebrates with pool parties, you'll still spot rose petals floating in the water, a fragrant bridge between California and the Armenian highlands. Even the playful ransom tradition, where children demand candy before releasing their watery assaults, mirrors Aztec's mythical bribes to nature spirits. What makes Vadavar extraordinary isn't just its survival, but its adaptability. When water shortages threatened the festival, Armenians innovated with spray bottles instead of buckets. When COVID-19 paused public gatherings, families celebrated on balconies, tossing water balloons into the empty streets below, proving not even a pandemic could extinguish this liquid thread of memory. From Aztec's rose-petal tears to Christ's transfigured light, from Soviet subversion to TikTok challenges, Vadavar reminds us that traditions don't fossilize. They flow, carving new channels through time while always remembering their source. So the next time you feel a sudden splash on a hot July day in Armenia, don't just reach for a towel, pause. That water running down your face carries echoes of a goddess's blessing, a saint's miracle, and 1,000 summers of resilient joy. And who knows, maybe Aztec still smiles through the droplets, watching her roses bloom anew in each drenched and laughing face. High on the wind-scoured plateaus of Tibet, where the air thins to a breathless whisper, death takes flight in the most extraordinary way. Sky burials, known as Jeta, giving alms to the birds, aren't merely funerary rites. They're the ultimate act of generosity, where the human body becomes one final offering to the natural world. Picture this: a Rogiapa, or body breaker, unwraps a white cotton scarf from the deceased, their movements precise as they slice the flesh in ritual patterns. Nearby, Himalayan griffon vultures circle patiently, their wings casting shadows like fleeting thoughts across the rocky earth. Within hours, every trace of the departed is carried skyward, bones crushed with barley flour for the birds to consume, the soul released without clinging to the physical form. This practice isn't about austerity, it's profound ecology intertwined with Buddhist philosophy. In Vajrayana teachings, the body after death is an empty vessel, a teaching on anicca, impermanence, written in flesh and bone. Tibet's rugged terrain, where wood is too scarce for cremation and the ground too hard for burial, made sky burials a practical necessity, but the ritual transcends utility. By feeding vultures considered dakinis, or sky-dancing wisdom beings, the deceased participates in the cycle of compassion, nourishing life even in death. The griffons, revered as clean and sacred, are never hunted. Their presence is a blessing, their swift consumption a sign the soul is accepted. The symbolism unfolds in layers. The Rogiapa uses a hammer to break remaining bones, mixing them with tsampa, roasted barley, in a gesture echoing tantric practices where ego is ground into wisdom. No graves mark the land, the earth stays unburdened, mirroring the Buddhist ideal of non-attachment. Families don't mourn loudly, instead, they hang prayer flags to catch the wind, their mantras dissolving into the atmosphere like the body itself. Even the timing is deliberate. Burials often coincide with dawn, when the veil between worlds is thinnest, or during auspicious lunar phases believed to aid the soul's transition. Modern misunderstandings have cast shadows over this tradition. Western sensationalism often reduces it to macabre exotica, ignoring its spiritual depth. Chinese authorities, citing hygiene concerns, have restricted access to sky burial sites, though Tibetan communities quietly uphold the practice in remote areas. Yet science affirms its elegance. Vultures' stomach acids neutralize pathogens, making this one of the most environmentally sound burial methods on Earth. Zero waste, zero pollution. To witness a sky burial is to confront mortality's raw truth, stripped of metaphor. A Tibetan proverb says, "The body is like a guest house, the soul checks out at dawn." In a world grasping for sustainable death care, from biodegradable pods to mushroom suits, this ancient ritual whispers a radical lesson, that in letting go completely, we might finally become part of everything.
From the silent flight of vultures, we turn next to a tradition where the dead don't vanish into the sky, but rise to walk among the living. Mexico's Dia de los Muertos. But that's a celebration painted in marigolds and candlelight, from the flaming Norse Yule Logs to the echoing chants of Tibetan sky burials. These 30 traditions aren't just isolated curiosities, they're threads in a vast, shimmering tapestry woven by human imagination across millennia. What binds them together isn't geography or dogma, but something far more profound. A shared language of myth that transforms the chaos of existence into stories worth remembering. Whether it's the Aztecs bargaining with the sun or Hawaiian navigators charting stars by Maui's hook, these rituals all ask the same urgent questions. Where do we belong? How do we survive the darkness? And what do we owe to those who came before us? The real magic lies in how these myths adapt without losing their souls. The Olentsiro's soot-stained face morphs from pagan omen to Christmas hero. Armenia's rosewater becomes holy water. Even in our hyper-connected age, we still knock on wood, toss spilled salt over our shoulders, or feel our necks prickle at midnight, proof that these traditions aren't relics, but living companions whispering across generations. They persist because they work not as superstitions but as psychological tools. The Wild Hunt gave names to winter's terrors. The Eleusinian Mysteries offered solace in mortality. Sky burials dissolve grief into ecology. These weren't primitive delusions, they were ancient technologies for navigating a world full of wonders and wounds. Now we turn the page to you. What stories hum in your family's bones? Maybe your grandmother swore by a charm against evil eye, or your uncle kept a wartime talisman in his pocket. Every culture, every kitchen table holds fragments of this mythic language, the folk tales told over dishes, the superstitions muttered during storms. Share them in the comments. Let's weave new patterns in this eternal tapestry. Because the next chapter of mythology isn't just etched in temple walls or frozen in folklore, it's unfolding right now, in the small rituals we create without even realizing it. And this is only the beginning. Soon we'll dive deeper into the blood-soaked ball courts of Maya underworlds, the forbidden libraries of occult Europe, the dreamtime songlines that map Australia's soul. But for now, as the hearth fires of these stories glow in the dark, remember, the oldest myths survive not because they're true, but because they're truer than fact. They're the compasses we still reach for when the map ends and the night begins.